I am here today with Phil Beisel again. He decided to come back even after I had him on the last time.
Yeah.
Phil, how are things in Tennessee?
Well, my daughter goes
I
to
see. I see.
she goes there. She goes to Tickle School of Engineering, um, studies biomedical engineering. So
There was a lot of unhappy college
I know.
rooting over the last few days. Yeah.
So she's home here in California. She had a ticket to go to the Rose Bowl,
She
but that
didn't know.
that didn't happen. I mean, well, Tennessee didn't go. Tennessee didn't go. So, but yeah. So
Well, okay. Listen,
right.
speaking of challenges and competitors and teams and sports and all that kind of stuff, you used to be with the other side. I'm sorry, I didn't say that.
Get this out as well.
Yeah, you were a Rivian C-suiter.
Not C-suite.
Oh, not C-suite.
No, no. That's very, very good that I wasn't.
Oh, okay.
I didn't want to do that.
All
That's
right, but you were an executive. Can I say executive at Rivian?
we can claim that. Yeah.
Claim that. All right.
Um,
So
yeah.
So you were over there. Now, let's make it clear. Most of the people, I think the vast majority of Tesla fans, the fanboys, the fangirls, the people that invest in Tesla, I think the vast majority that I've seen on X, on YouTube, etc., are rooting for Rivian. I've hardly seen anybody not rooting for Rivian. So we're not here. I'm not going to use this time to try to in any way root against Rivian because
There,
they're seemingly making some very good cars, the highest rank on customer satisfaction.
yeah.
All seven customers must really like their cars.
That's funny. Yeah, I have a Rivian R1T.
Okay.
Uh, my car is in the first 100 produced by the factory, so
Okay.
a special car.
Yes.
I
Yes.
just came up on 3 years of ownership. It was Halloween Day 3 years ago. I took possession of the car. And I also have a fairly brand new Model 3 Performance.
Oh.
So
Oh. Oh,
it's
my
really
car, the one I
that's it.
want.
It's great. It's fantastic. But the truth be told, both cars are really fantastic. I mean, I enjoy having them both actually. And what's cool is I get to like really compare them quite directly
Yeah.
without a lot of noise between what people think one is versus what the other is. Um, like I say to my friends, I think that the Rivian user interface is much more refined than the Tesla interface, believe it or not.
Hmm.
You can see that right away when you just look at the cars. But
Well, now you don't. I don't think Rivian has fart mode.
no, no,
So right away,
yeah,
Tesla wins. I mean, there's just
they'll play up the same game. Like there was quite a big um, Halloween kind of Easter egg type of
oh,
thing in the
uh,
Rivian software release this year. They've done that several years. But yeah, it's fun having them both. They're both great cars. I take the Rivian like I'm like, okay, it's a seriously rainy day and we're gonna, let's take that car. But what probably draws me a lot to the Tesla is really full self-driving, honestly,
yeah,
because I use it for at least half my miles. I legitimately thought when I first got it, it would just be for me playing around with the tech and testing it out. And now I actually find that it's the way I want to drive many times because I realize there's a lot of times I don't really want to drive a car. I just want to get
yeah,
somewhere in a car.
yeah.
So it's very impressive. And the Rivian isn't there on in that regard. Um, but yeah, I
So,
mean, they're both great. They're both great.
yeah. All right. Yeah. So again, I don't want to use this as an attack show,
Hmm.
but I will say that as an ex-CEO myself of a much smaller company, doing a far less complicated manufacturing job, I have from time to time looked over my shoulder at Rivian and said, "Gosh, with those beautiful cars. They're attractive. Cars that are getting good ratings, good rankings from their customers, from reviewers. Why aren't they selling more? As I'm a sales guy, that's what I've done my whole life. I'm a sales and marketing guy when it comes
Yeah.
down to it. And I'm like, why aren't they selling more? The numbers came out today. I think it was 14,000 for the quarter, 15,000 for the quarter, something like that.
Well, I think I mean, part of the reason is if you there's a really nice graph. I wish I had it available to show you. Given the price point of a car,
Uh-huh.
many are available for sale in the total. Like, what's the TAM
Right.
for a $70,000 car, an $80,000 car, $90,000 car, and then as it drops down,
Yeah.
at 50, 40, and we're talking about that, now with Tesla Model 2.5 type of thing. It's like if we can drop that down another 10K, the TAM gets bigger, right?
Right.
So
Not
so
bigger.
yeah, exactly. So where Rivian's kind of locked is in the high end right now in the market, and there's only so many cars that are sold there. Um, and so as they don't have the scale that say a Tesla has to um, push COGS. They don't have that type of leverage, so they're kind of stuck a little bit, and that's why they've obviously introduced the R2 concept, that they'll be producing that car in the next I don't know 26 or something, and the R3, R3X. Um, so they're heading down in the
Mhm.
market. I mean, this is what you always do. It's sort of exactly the Tesla plan on day one was, sell cars to the high end, take that money, well, we know that, reinvest it and push it further down. So that, Rivian's kind of clocking in that same fashion, I think. Um, so there's only going to be so many cars they can sell there. And the competitive forces of Cybertruck, and to a certain extent, I guess, um, Ford Lightning for folks that are into buying uh, box trucks. These things look terrible. Yeah, I mean they're going to sell some there, right? I mean, like when Rivian first released the R1T, um, it was a bit of a greenfield, right? There's nobody there. It, you knew who knew when Cybertruck would show up in the market.
Right.
The other thing is, people probably don't know this, but on day one, or at least day one when I was there. By the way, those cars were called the A1T or A1S, prior to then relabeled R1T, R1S. We knew that the SUV would sell
Mhm.
uh, more than the truck.
Mhm.
We knew that,
Mhm.
but the truck was unique, and is a brand new company producing two cars on a new platform. You got to pick
Mhm.
which one. So if you went out in the SUV, you had so much competition there,
Right.
right?
Right.
From the Suburbans and the Tahoes and the Escalades and the Land Rovers, and things that feel and look like SUVs.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
by coming out with a truck, it made kind of a unique. And I think today SUV is their predominant. I haven't looked recently, but the SUV is the predominant sales. I mean, I think, or even in the early days, our pre-orders were skewed 60, 70% towards the SUV.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
so
So,
yeah,
yeah, all right. So some people have suggested that, and this makes no sense to me, as a manufacturer, you and I think, would agree that if you're losing money on every single vehicle, the key would be, I think anyway, the key would be to try to sell a lot more vehicles so you can get the cost down through scale and eventually get to where even if you're only making $10 a vehicle, at least you're
yeah,
positive.
yeah.
And I've heard people say not only about Rivian, but about other companies that are losing money on every car. They're like, well, yeah, they're not going to make a bunch more cars because they're just going to lose that much more money. And does that make any sense to you? Or maybe
No,
there's
not
something
really.
I'm missing on that.
No, I mean, I think it scales where it's at.
Okay.
Obviously, there's the problem with scale is you have a kind of a upfront large fixed cost that you're putting in, which is where we come with these ideas that we're losing money on,
Right.
losing 30, 40, whatever $1,000 per vehicle. The that's because of all the initial CapEx.
Right.
Um, and and of course that amortized over time. And the more you make amortized over the scale, you start to, I mean, so obviously building an individual vehicle is not like you're losing $30,000 on that vehicle directly. It's really based on all the costs that has gone in to get to the point where you can produce that. I mean, Rivian, as we were talking earlier a bit, Rivian, Rivian had a choice as it entered the market to either go for it, like play the game like they're going to win big, or to kind of play small ball. And there's no reason to play small ball in the business. It made a lot more sense to go for it, to spend more, to build bigger capacity facilities. Uh, to me, it makes sense. I mean, in hindsight, people look at it and say, look on the debt side of this business. Um, yeah, I mean, it's a real thing. It's what's kind of held back the probably people's idea that the company will be successful is like, will, can it reach out, can it pull itself out of that debt spiral
Right.
and become, whatever the right accounting word is, cash flow positive. I mean, I'm not on that side of the business, so
Okay. All right.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, don't get me there. But the point is, I think, kind of like from the macro, uh, Rivian's business was, we're going to go for it. We're not going to sit there and hang back, and you got to try these things. I mean, that's what I think. For those that I see in the Tesla community who criticize Rivian, it's kind of funny watching them criticize Rivian because this is exactly the things they want Elon to do. Go,
Right.
you know, and so it's, when you're building these businesses, it's very hard. Um, I mean, people that were there the early days of Tesla, extremely hard, right?
Really hard. Yeah, I just watched
Yeah,
it.
I mean,
Just watched an interview the other day with three of the guys that were there during the startup, and the stories they were telling of there was no accelerator pedal uh,
yeah,
uh, mechanism for an electric car. And they kept trying to find somebody who could make that accelerator. Nobody made anything like it. They had to invent it and create it themselves. There was other things like that they had to. There was no one gear, transmission, single gear transmission, and they spent millions trying to get somebody to make one, and nobody could make one. They had to make it themselves. I mean, it's just crazy stuff.
the problems for anybody that's ever founded a startup or started a business realizes how incredibly hard it is. And I have incredible respect for people that do that. I've started a few companies myself. They're hard. And, you know, um, and then the car companies are even harder. I
Yeah,
mean, just dramatically, it's like the most insane business to want to go into, right? Um, because of like all that capital cost and uh yeah, it's a bit
well,
nuts.
10,000, 20,000 parts. I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, especially if you come at it from like the ICE car side, right? Like the number of parts in those vehicles is kind of insane. I mean, it's a crazy thing to do, but if you do it and you're successful, then everybody looks at it like, success has a thousand fathers, right?
That's right. Our product, of course, we had more products than that, but our main product was bicycle water bottles. And we had the buyer at Target one time said, because we had some kind of a problem, I can't remember what it was. And the buyer said to my partner, he says, guys, there's only two parts to your product and none of them move. Do you think you could get it right?
Right, right. A little easier. Yeah, but I mean, but reflect back on that. The hardships that you probably went through were
Oh man, I can't.
were extreme, right? And
Oh, yeah.
so, when people start any kind of business, whether it's a restaurant or a tech startup, um, or anybody that manufactures anything, that I mean, that to me is like I'm a software guy, right? And I look at a physical good, a physical object, and I go, oh my God, how do you do that? Like, how do you get that at scale? Um, it's sort of like the fun for me when I joined Rivian was as a software guy, I'm going in there literally from a software perspective. I had been at Apple previously, so I had, a lot of good experience integrating software to hardware because Apple does
Right,
both
right.
quite purposely. Um, but it was a whole nother level just looking at the whole vehicle engineering side and seeing how people would approach that. And in the early days of Rivian, there was a lot of traditionalists, like, because Rivian was first situated in suburban Detroit, and purposely because it wanted to touch the talent base and the supply chain there. And then as it started, the interesting thing was I could see that almost on day one, RJ the CEO of Rivian, was towards Silicon Valley, and to think of it as more of a tech kind of company.
Right.
But through good purpose, for good reason, he started the company in suburban Detroit, and then eventually moved out of there. When he realized that, you know, the kind of like even if you got the cream of the crop from the Detroit crew, you're still getting a certain mindset and how
Right.
people
Right.
thought about building a vehicle. And of course, in the early days, suppliers, you had to go see your suppliers. They wouldn't even come to your building. Um, and now, once Rivian, like right around the IPO or before the IPO, and the run up to all that hype, and um, the suppliers were, they would come to you quite aggressively. So so everything changes at a certain point. But like, do you create a car company in a place that has traditionally created cars?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
a there's some benefits there, but you can see how that holds you back. There's never you bring people in, there's never first principles thinking happening there,
Right. Right. Right.
right? No one, the reason I think there were a lot of first, I mean, the CEO himself, I think, really kind of fostered the notion that he's a kind of a first principles thinker, a very intelligent individual. But one of the reasons, and I shouldn't even say it out loud, that we were first principles, that we didn't even know what we were doing. Like from from the tech side, we were more or less trying to build an iPhone with wheels.
Yeah. Right.
Uh,
Right.
not necessarily a car.
Yeah. Yeah.
But things got really great at Rivian when the McLaren folks came in.
Hmm.
Probably don't know that, but um, RJ hired the guy who ran vehicle engineering, a gentleman by the name of Mark Vanells, came from McLaren, and Mark deceased, unfortunately, but great guy, and brought a lot of really great people into the company who had sort of the McLaren mindset,
Mm.
um, which, while they traditionally built ICE vehicles, they built obviously high performance vehicles. So there's a certain aspect of the design that kind of came through. Um, so we were able to do, a one plus one is kind of three. We would add or build a very modern tech stack to the vehicle, which is what my team started. And then we would have a really great, you know, car to put that tech stack in.
Right.
Um, and that took a while, but because, it's like it's a little different, I think, than the way Tesla came about. Tesla came about, through, Elon kind of just directed it to be the way he kind of thought it to be. And well, I thought that RJ did that as well. It was a bit more, um, there's a bit more of bringing other people into the fold and how the decisions were made, I think. Does it make sense?
Actually, in listening to that video the other day, and I did do a lot of research on it, previously when I wrote the books.
Hmm.
A lot of theirs came from They have a name for them. I heard the name yesterday, and again, I forgot it already. But there's a bunch of folks, especially in Europe, that build the cars. They build for General Motors, they build for Ford. Kind of like in China, you got SAIC and
Yeah.
some of these people that build the cars and then put the label on them. Well, you have a bunch of those in Europe too, and that's what Tesla originally did with the Roadster. Was they got one of those companies, a Lotus? Was it a Lotus? I think it was.
Yeah, but it took, yeah, the original Rose
Right,
Roadster was the Lotus body.
right. So
And
they got
I remember how Elon wanted changes to that.
that they couldn't do.
Yeah,
They couldn't even make it wider. It had to be
yeah, they
exactly.
want change the door handles and this to make
Right.
better seats. And they're like, no, we're just trying to slap an electric powertrain in an existing body.
Yeah.
Or if we start to make the changes, Elon was already trying to build Tesla with that car.
Yeah.
Maybe better suited to get to the next car and leave that one alone because that was just really out there to prove the concept that it wasn't, a golf cart,
All right.
right?
So you're a current investor in Rivian. You're an investor in Tesla.
Correct.
You're an even-handed looking guy right now. I don't see Rivian as any threat to Tesla at all at this point. I think that'd be ridiculous to conceive of it as a threat. And again, I think almost everybody in the community is rooting for Rivian. What what do you think about Rivian? I know that you want Rivian to do well. Do you see a path in your own head as you watch them describe their path? Do you see a path to them getting to that cash flow positive, to that actual profitability?
Well, I mean, I'm not the expert on the finance side.
Okay.
So to go down that path, you have the wrong guest. But um, are they building cars that people love, their buyers? Yes.
Mhm.
And I'm a believer that if you build a great product, people will come to
Mhm.
that and buy that product. And certainly if the market is big enough, there are lots of buyers that are not buying Teslas. And I mean, today we know how much market share Tesla has relative. And as we see the convergence into, uh, EVs, like for me, that cross 50% US market share is probably about 2032-ish. If you kind of follow the data on the S curve. Um, so I mean, who's the losers here? I think are the legacy automakers, the General Motors, Ford, Stellantis. Those guys, you know, they're never going to build great. It's not just EVs. They're not going to build great cars, going forward. They don't have the mindset because what's happened to the car is it's become a tech device now,
Right.
right? It's not just a car the way and those guys can't get out of first gear. I mean, to be unworthy, they
Right.
really can't. So I don't see, for me, there's plenty of room for Rivian
Mhm.
to be there and Tesla will grow massively, Rivian will grow well, I hope. Um, but I think that the losers, unless they're propped up by our government, which they will be in some regard, never ends. But they're kind of like dead men walking, in my opinion. And I just don't see them keeping up. I mean, people, what's going to happen is that younger buyers that have the means to buy a car are going to look at the high tech kind of car. And a
Right.
Tesla Rivian is a high tech car compared to something else. If a young buyer can't afford the car, they're never going to buy one in the first place. That's
Right.
the trend. I mean, that's what's going to happen. What they're going to do is they're going to get, if they want to go to a party or a job, probably cybercab is the way they're going to get
Right.
there,
Right.
right? It's transportation as a service will steal a huge amount of the low end. And I think that's why uh, car companies that have been traditionally capable of making ICE cars at very low price points will find that people aren't buying them uh, not because they care one way or the other about um, electric sustain. None of those things will matter. What will matter is the fact is they won't be able to afford them anyway, or they don't want to pay that kind of fixed cost going in or monthly payment, and they'll just go into ride shares. If Tesla floods cities with cybercabs,
Mhm.
and suburban areas, the dollar per mile will go down precipitously. So I think we'll see a huge kinds of buyers that come from the newer generation will want the ones that can afford will want high tech vehicles, which are all EVs,
Mhm. Mhm.
almost the synonymous. Like it's not one leads the other, but they just simply are synonymous, right? Um, and then those who can't afford will have available to them robotaxi as an operation to get your ride share. So
So,
that's
so that's a great segue. That's a great segue. You are the perfect person to ask this question. Maybe you don't have the answer, but maybe you do. One of the things that the Tesla community is shocked at, and I'm sure you see this on X, and I know you're there on X, is why there hasn't been a licensing deal yet. I've always said that BYD is the obvious one. Ford has been one that people have talked about. But Volkswagen, who famously can't find their way around, in fact, they should hire you for the software because they can't figure out how to do software at all on cars. And I know Elon said that he's really looking for licensees that would be larger players. But why wouldn't Rivian, as a U.S. maker who might have more of a reason to need a niche again? You said the niche is the way you guys went. Why wouldn't Rivian be all over that, trying to get Elon to give them a license?
you mean specifically for FSD?
Preface, yes.
Yeah, it that is a very good question, and one that I think is like I'm not in the minds of the Rivian exec team today.
Right.
Um, I think what Rivian has tried to do is build its own, it's built its tech stack from the ground up, vertically integrated, hardware, software. Speaking of VW, that's like kind of where their largest deal structure is today, and taking that technology and pushing it across the VW product lines. I guess that would be VW, Porsche, Audi.
Right.
Um, so the one kind of like, wrinkle there is the FSD tech. And so if you're asking me on a kind of personal level, I think FSD is hard to chase. It's really, I think there's a lot of things that make it, um, it's a moat for Tesla, right? I don't think it's easy um, to have parity. So there's just a huge amount. I mean, there's technique and there's investment. I mean, like in terms of data center investment is ungodly.
Right.
Let's not forget technique. Like people that don't understand the technology think it's like something called magic AI, and it just happens to be that Tesla is trained a lot of data, like as if it's like out of the box AI. No, they've developed very specific um, mechanisms to build that neural net model for perception planning for FSD.
Mhm.
So it's unique that way. Like you can't just say, oh, that's it. That's just a thing. I can buy that thing. It's like, it's not open source, right? They developed that and they developed that over years. I remember how it was with FSD 11 and previous, the whole planning side was algorithmic,
No.
a lot of code, and then they eventually figured out how to get rid of the code and push it towards a pure AI model. So that's a very difficult moat to overcome. And I don't know Rivian's current strategy other than I know that it desires to have its own tech stack, um, and use that as it's like, okay, there's the Tesla tech stack, there's a Rivian tech stack. As for like, if you look at legacy automakers like Ford, or, I mean, perhaps you will see them come to Tesla to want to license that. I don't know how easy it is. Like, I mean, first off, let's be clear. I don't think Tesla has spent a lot of time on preparing that tech stack for pushing across other vehicle platforms. Okay, I think they've spent a lot of time honing it for their model
Right,
cars.
right.
So while they speak about that, you heard Elon speak about licensing. Why wouldn't everybody come to us?
Yes.
I think the first guy that comes to them to license is going to take a lot of arrows in the back, because it's going to be hard. Like it's going to be, okay, you got to take this piece of hardware, right? Because you have to take their inference chip.
Right.
There's probably a lot of issues about camera placement. I don't know how abstracted the video data is from the training. So is placement, super
Mhm.
um, positionally important? I don't know. I mean, answer is I don't know. But so you've got a bunch of like it's not just a piece of software that you can license. It is software coupled with a whole piece of hardware and that hardware is multi-purposed on the Tesla vehicle. So like certainly, I mean, like for example, I was reading an article that was talking about like Apple is having a hard time getting their latest CarPlay. They put this great new spec out for CarPlay. Um, that and so they're saying, well, why isn't it getting pushed out quicker? And saying, well, the car companies are working with them. They want to have control over it, right? They want to have like, oh, I want it to look exactly like this. I want our design to look like this. I want those guys will, um, you know, if you take somebody like you say at an executive level at a General Motors or a Ford, you could say, well, the marching orders are to do this. But once you kind of bring it down two or three levels of management, now they're going to pick it to death. They're gonna want this. They're gonna want that. This marketing group is gonna get in there and say this. That marketing group is gonna get, and they're gonna come, and they're, it's a function of leadership, right? I mean, the good thing is in terms of Rivian, like, while I can't give you the answer as to why Rivian will or will not, or may not
Mhm.
license, I will tell you that if it's decided, it will be decided by the CEO, obviously in consultation with his exec team, et cetera, but it's there's good leadership there.
Right, 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 right.
Um, you're not going to find that kind of model at General Motors.
Right.
So, like, I think, in the early days, when I say early days, when I was originally at Rivian, we had a deal with Ford. We entertained right after we debuted the cars at the LA Auto Show. We entertained meetings with Ford and General Motors, and I just felt like after meeting with like once you met with the executive, had an opportunity to meet with the proper executives. They're very gung ho. They're smart. They know what they want to do. But then once they push it down one or two levels of management, it just kind of dilutes into a mess.
Yeah.
Um, of requirements and things that should fit with their previous platforms in perfect ways. So you could imagine the fights that would happen of saying, well, we need these kind of camera placements. Well, no, we can't have that because we have two cameras that do this little feature and they're placed in this certain configuration. So do we add two cameras? No, well, let's go back to Tesla and tell them that we're not moving the cameras and that they should retrain the stack. I mean, you see what the
Yeah,
insanity?
yeah, yeah. No, no, I've been there, done that. I mean, again,
Yeah,
I had a little company, but we were selling to some bigger companies and some really big companies, like I don't know, Walmart and Kmart. And anyway, so yeah, I mean, I've dealt with the craziness that happens once
yeah.
you.
They spec it to death, right? It's like, and it gets to the point where they can't get what they want, in spite of themselves. Like it's their fault, right? But they can't. And it's, by the way, a lot of it is like job security within too, right?
Sure.
Like there are groups that are like, wow, if we let this feature get this place, then, like I imagine without knowing specifically that there are teams inside of General Motors, inside of Ford, telling the executive team, we've got this. And maybe
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
Tesla has progressed, they're less and less confident of that,
Right.
right?
Yes.
But remember, if you go back a little less than maybe a year and a half ago, the feature set for autonomous was really how you went up this level one, level two, level three, level four, level
Right.
five ladder, right? So
Right.
it was a sort of your increment your way to complete autonomy. Whereas Tesla's like, I don't even care about those numbers. I'm going straight to autonomy, um, unsupervised in owner vehicles and obviously no driver controls in cybercab. But yeah, I think for certainly for legacy, I think they'll be forced to license it.
Mhm.
I don't know when they'll come to the table, and I
No.
and I and I dare say that I don't think Tesla's really ready to accept them.
Mm.
I mean, from my point of view, like, look, as a Tesla shareholder, who cares? I
Yeah.
mean, I, you can make a lot of money licensing the vehicles, but if where the market goes is if people stop driving vehicles, who cares? Like if you know 30% of all the miles are in the robotaxi network,
Right.
why does it matter? I mean, the reality is that Tesla's better focused on probably um, getting Cybercab to massive scaled production.
Right.
Right? That's probably the cheaper they make that, the lower
Mhm.
per mile cost they can offer. I mean, their competition, even though a lot of people wouldn't say it, is it's less about worrying about Ford and the vehicles on the road. I think it's more about worrying about Waymo and Cruise or some of the others that are playing in that space. I mean, I don't think those people have game, but what I'm saying is,
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
no, what I'm saying is, I think that um, where Tesla needs to head is autonomy, 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 and not worry so much about how the world, or I should say the Tesla investor shouldn't necessarily worry about Tesla wanting to get into the business of worrying about how Legacy wants to do their business in the future.
Right. Yeah. I think part of it is the Elon always has the mission in mind. He's always got, the bigger picture in mind of it will be unethical to drive a car or to not have cars that are autonomous once autonomy happens because those cars will be death traps by comparison.
Sure.
And so I think that that's part of the reason. Again, when you take a look at even beyond robotaxi and you go to Optimus, at the point that you start shipping millions of Optimi, none of the other divisions are going to be of consequence. We saw this at our own company. We had a very, very, very good tire changing tool of all things, and other tire changing tools sold in the hundreds of thousands, even the millions of units. And we had the best one in the world. We proven it 15 different ways. It was the best, fastest, easiest to use, but we were only selling 100,000 a year at $1 a piece to the distributors. So it was $100,000 business, and we were a $5.5 million business. It got lost. It was no
Yeah.
longer nobody. You couldn't get anybody excited within the company to go out and be the product
I
champion.
mean, a
So
company can't,
when Tesla's doing $1 trillion a year in
yeah,
Optimus,
I mean, a company shouldn't, Tesla doesn't need to play everywhere. It needs to play where it matters. It needs to play where, it has to skate where the puck is going.
right?
It gets that. That's why I think most of us love that company because they get that intrinsically. Um, and why play? I mean, that's what I think. That's why I brought up that Apple CarPlay issue.
Yeah,
And imagine the folks in the CarPlay division are going, pulling their hair out, working with General Motors or Ford or whoever, going, why? Ugh. Now, of course, that's the business of that thing, right? And I'm sure that that stack would have been, what they would have used for sort of some of their interface, conceptually for what they did with Project Titan. Had they gone pure play, built the
Okay.
car,
Right.
you know, um, and I'm not saying that Apple's doing the wrong thing. I'm just saying that, Apple normally is in the business of building a device that they sell directly to the consumer, and they're shipping, I don't know, umpteen number of iPhones a year, and yet they have this division over here that's beating their head against the wall trying to get.
The tire change. It's a tire changing tool.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, in some sense, my opinion of it is it doesn't matter whether Tesla licenses to
Right.
the old. It needs to focus more on the new. And I mean, like, for example, a lot of, even dial it down to, it's like, I remember a little bit less than a year ago, there was a lot of conversation in the Tesla community about um, how much revenue, like very, very high margin revenue, software margin revenue, would FSD add to the vehicle because people would subscribe for whatever it's going to eventually cost.
Right.
Um, and I'm thinking to myself, well, that's great, and there may be a lot of business there, but isn't that still small potatoes compared to FSD on Robotaxi?
Yeah. Very small.
You
Yes.
know?
But it's good. But it's, yeah, but it's a, by the way, I don't want to
By
stop
the
it.
way, that one's easy for them to do, right? It's their
Yes.
own vehicle, so
Yes.
obviously they will do it. Um,
And I
but
want to talk, and I want to make sure that we keep all those balls in the air because I need content.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, if it came down, if it was only Optimus, there would be, well, I don't know. I've got so much content for Optimus. In fact, I want to do another show with you where uh, on the last show that we did together, you brought something up which I still don't think I have been able to get across to the community. And this is something I want to do a whole show with you about. So I'm going to tease it right now. Is the we were talking, you said Optimus will be able to, let's say, be used as a street sweeper for some city. So the Optimus will be out there sweeping the streets, going up and down, making sure that, because that's really one of those beautiful things about Optimus is we will probably have the cleanest cities
Yep.
in the world, the cleanest beaches because it'll be so cheap to keep them clean.
Finally,
And finally. So, but you said, by the way, Optimus can multitask, unlike humans who can't actually. Some think they can, but they can't. That the wild Optimus is streeping the street, whatever I just said, he will be able to count the pedestrians coming by, count how many are going into which stores, um,
yeah,
what
yeah. Oh my God,
any other kind of tasking that he might be able to do while he's out there on the
yeah.
street, all simultaneously without skipping a beat. And so that content might be good for the chamber, for the city, for the local businesses that are on the street to find out all these the number of cars that are going by, the number of children that trip over a side. Oh, that there's something wrong with the sidewalk and report it automatically to the city. So anyway, I thought it would be fun for you to maybe for us to brainstorm on another show about the ways that the Optimus might multitask in various jobs.
Well, Optimus is my favorite topic.
Is it
So,
okay?
oh, absolutely. I mean, I think, um, I look at Tesla and I say, if all of the things go away and Optimus succeeds, um, that's good enough. Because
Nutty, nutty
yeah,
number.
it's a nutty market. It's a huge market.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to change everything on planet Earth. It's
Elon,
like,
Elon says it'll break the economy.
what's
Or
that?
it'll change the definition of economics. Yeah.
Clearly, I mean, I don't even understand how. But I mean, like, I think the one thing I'd say about it is if you look at kind of technology, companies like Apple say have been looking for, like, what is the next kind of consumer platform? I'll
Right.
call it consumer platform. Like, so you
Right.
go from personal computers, Macintosh, you went on to mobile devices like iPhone, iPad's not it, right? That's a little niche type of thing that has its place. Um, and then they went towards this whole Vision Pro, Vision OS, and it kind of stumbled, right?
Mhm.
And so what are they looking? They have this kind of holy grail, like what's the next? I mean, watch is a big market for them,
Right.
for example, but it's not really a platform. Like at some point the iPhone goes away and something replaces it. And what is that thing? And I say it's the Optimus. I mean, maybe not specifically Optimus, it's the
Yes.
category of Optimus, but and I believe actually specifically Optimus, but I think that's the next sort of I think we as consumers we ultimately want something that's embodied. Like in other words, these AI tools are incredible. I
Mhm.
mean, they're getting better,
Mhm.
scary, cool, amazing, but they're not really something that's embodied. And when we get that AI embodied in a big way, it's probably Optimus, right? Because then you have something that that can take that to task as well. I mean, even if Apple is um, super successful with Apple Intelligence, if it gets there, like they've stumbled out of the gate on that one too, I think. But let's assume that that becomes noise and then a lot of people are using for the first time AI through that device. That's kind of what they want,
Right.
right? That's
Right.
what they want. But to me, it doesn't have legs, it doesn't have arms, so it can't really do a lot of these other things.
I think it's even bigger than that. And again, I don't think I've been able to convince anybody but myself of this, but I'll try it on you. I don't happen to own a dog right now, but I've owned lots of dogs and cats over the years. I can have a conversation all day long with a dog or a cat. I can, hey, does that feel good? Whatever, I mean, and you're talking to your dog, you're talking to your cat, and yeah, it's really hard, even though I know that I can ask. I did today. I asked two multiplication questions of Siri, but it was hard. It wasn't natural. It wasn't normal to ask Siri to do the multiplication. Now, I would go on it and do it as a calculator. That's natural and normal. But to just say, hey, Siri, do this calculation
Yeah,
for me,
yeah.
just not natural. But
It's
a robot, a humanoid
it's
robot
yeah. I
dressed
mean,
in human clothes, it'd be
you have
easy.
another human in the house, or you're with another human, or if you're with a group of humans, other humans know that you're talking to them.
Right.
They can pick up. I think that's where we'll get to certainly with Optimus, and that fact that it will know when it's being um, communicated with, be able to respond to us. Um, I mean, it's. I mean, of course, what I'm saying here is I'm talking about it as the CP3O, right? I'm
Right. Right.
like the easiest thing for the community at large to grasp is it in the hands of consumers. Now, I personally believe that it starts its way in manufacturing
Of
service
course.
businesses and works its way up because one of the reasons that will be true is largely because the software will be, I think as I said in the previously, it start off as a productivity machine and end up as a reasoning machine.
Yeah.
And so that what that means is there's a path for software upgrades. Just like we've gotten version 12 of FSD and now we're on to 13 and some point oh 14 and not only do you get features, but you get, like 13 is dramatically better. I
Mhm.
think we'll see the same exact thing
Right.
with Optimus. And so it makes sense that it would start its life in this sort of place where it doesn't need a personality. It doesn't need heavy human interaction, and it's largely there for productivity reasons, like a factory.
Right.
And then eventually move into the home or into at least customer facing applications. Um, but man, that's where my head's at. Like I literally think about that product every single day.
Every single day. Well, you can imagine that I do
Literally,
as well.
yeah. So,
All right, listen, Phil, I'm going to let you go for this particular round, but I do want to have you back very soon to talk more about Optimus, your favorite subject,
my favorite subject.
and way at the top of my list of favorite subjects as well. So thank you again for coming on and talking about Rivian. I almost never talk about the competition. I've said many, many times on the show and elsewhere that as a manufacturer, as a distributor, as a salesman, my whole life, I've never cared about the competition. Elon doesn't care about the competition. And so it's a rare thing to talk about on the show. But I thought in this particular case, I think it's really, really relevant as Rivian does have a path to end up being one of the winners in the space. And also because I had you available to talk about it, so that made it easier to get to something that was going to be more newsworthy, more interesting to the crowd.
Well,
So
it certainly helped me understand the space better myself, right? I mean, it obviously I hold shares in both companies, but the real point is that it's like, if you want to understand iPhone really well, you also need to understand Android really well.
yeah,
You can't go out there and say I completely understand. I see what, like there are fanboys in either camp, but at some point you have to kind of check yourself and look back and say, well, what's good and what's different and who has the edge here and so forth. And I think that I've always thought of, Rivian as sort of the little brother in the space
yeah,
to Tesla. It
good way
doesn't,
to put it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, anybody that sees it um, as a direct threat, that Tesla needs to really kind of reevaluate a bit, perhaps, and see it for what it should be, which is what we have is a technology revolution happening in auto that is essentially moving towards the players of Tesla, the players of Rivian, and away from legacy. No matter how well legacy is propped up, it's dying.
Yeah, yeah. All right, Phil.
Right.
Again, I thank you so much for being on, and to all of you out there, it has been great talking to you.
Yes, and Happy New Year to everyone listening.